to deliver stimulating and innovative presentations on a variety of topics. One of the members of our education committee has done nothing but sing her praises about the amazing technology she uses in her presentation. That's what we're all here to learn about. Thanks, Sharon.
Kate, thank you so much. Amber, you can have a seat. You don't have to stand the whole thing. And good morning to those who are here on Zoom. I know we just have a couple here in the room, so you know, we'll go ahead and get started. There's a series of no, Rachel's showing up. So
I heard you guys talking. If they have questions, I'm going to put it in the chat box. They can email me questions and I'll make sure that they get to
I
you.
was just getting that if they had questions, they
Oh.
can also text it to my phone number. Amber will help keep track of
Perfect.
any text
Okay.
messages that come in. And even if you're watching this after and it's recorded and you have a quick question on something, you can always drop me a text. When you do, just please put your name in the text so I know who I'm talking to and it's not some random person. Your message neighbor or whatever it is. Yeah, so you're welcome to text me messages as we go out. I have a series of 4 presentations this morning. So you have my number on there. I also want to put up there is my Twitter account, which is at Schaaf DNP. So I get a lot of ideas on there and I post a few ideas, but I follow a lot of other educational technologists and instructional technology people, and I really get a lot of good ideas from them. And there's so many out there. It was hard to really hone it down to just the time frame that we have this morning and not overwhelm everyone. And I even thought maybe starting, if next year you wanted to actually bring your laptops, bring some presentations, we can work on sprucing them up if you're interested for next year. So this first one we're doing is creating readable slides. Okay, so this we're going to cover the following objectives. You know, explain how to use font size and type for a presentation, along with what are some color contrast issues and the best ones that are for presentation slides. I know there are a lot of templates out there, but even the ones that are stock templates from either PowerPoint or Keynote, I tend to use, I have Mac products, so I use Keynote more than I do PowerPoint. There's just some functionality that I like about those, but there's also some functionality I like about PowerPoint. So sometimes it's when I need something certain, that's when I'll pick which software I'm going to use. But I usually mostly use Keynote. And that's what I'm using here. But even some of the stock templates that you get in there, probably not the best. And as far as the person who's sitting in the back of the room trying to read. So I wanted to talk about fonts and font sizes. So we have 2 types of fonts. One is the sans serif. Okay, and that just means that on the, I had my Apple pencil here. Where'd it go? Yeah.
Oh, it's on top of your thing.
No, I actually put it on top. Funny how that works. Let me make this bigger. Okay. So when we look at our font size, I wish I had somebody who was really in the back of the room today. So that going from smallest to largest, but a sans serif doesn't have those little edges to the font. So as you're looking at them, I'm going to use this. I'm talking here on the graphic. So we're seeing that it's just a plain G. It's not a G. All right, my writing's not the best. It's not a G that has a little extra little types of characters or shapes on the end. So these are some types of fonts that you can use, and a lot of it depends on what's the theme of your presentation. I also want to talk about font size, because if we look and we try and use a 12-point font, it kind of looks fine on my slide when I'm holding it here in my hand or on my laptop. Oh, it looks fine. But this is what it looks like when you're at the back of the room on the big screen, is that you can barely see that 12-point font. All right, and I put some different sizes in here, a lot with some different types of the sans serif fonts. So I have graphic, Gill Sans, Express, and Trebuchet. And you can see the difference between 12, 18, 24, 28, 32, 36, and 48. So instead of, as we always look at our computer or our tablet, iPad, whatever, right here in our hands, it's very visual to us, but we're only looking at maybe 14 inches away. When you're creating presentations, looking at font size, consider the person at the back of the room, okay? They're the ones that have to read it most. And sometimes when I'm teaching and we're in a small classroom, it's just a small classroom and it's maybe 25 feet back and everybody sits at the front. Nobody ever sits at the front. Everybody's always at the back of the room. Okay, so it may not seem that big of a deal in that size room, but the room we're in here today is, I don't know, let's see what. Okay, 45 feet.
In progress.
Okay, so that's farther on back. So if we were at the back of the room, we'd have a lot of difficulties kind of seeing these fonts. Now, the top font on our title says serif, and that's in a size 84 point. Oh, I couldn't remember the last word. So always think about those. So here's the serif fonts. Again, 84 at the top. The fonts I showed here are Times New Roman, Palatino, Typewriter, and Georgia. And these are some common ones that actually you can see those little, the typeface has the
How is
little
everything?
extra,
Okay,
little extra
is he still at home?
here on the letters. Like if
Good.
we look at the
Yeah,
N,
so
I thought, oh,
not a
no.
plain N,
Yeah.
it has these little extras on it.
Good.
Just helps with sometimes clarity of the information. Serif fonts can sometimes be used if maybe it's more, I don't want to say playful or maybe less casual presentation or more casual. You can use these serif fonts, I'm sorry, the serif fonts with a more technical, professional, I don't want to say professional because they're all professional. I'm drawing a blank on the word I want.
Hi, Chris, how are you?
Morning. So how are you?
Just more
Thank you.
technical if you want a little bit.
You guys having a good morning?
We are busy
I don't know,
trying
some
to
people
do
would
two
say, again, more professional
presentations
or
at once.
higher
Chris,
level.
Oh,
The
that-
serif,
that's
if
Well,
you want a
by
little
the
bit more
time
playful, a
you
little bit
present,
more
we'll have it down.
casual,
pat,
or
so
the,
don't worry
for the
about it.
sans serif. So
I'm worried.
it all depends on kind of the talk.
Now, is the room?
When
You're
you're
gonna be,
divided or
it's
live.
divided and
They
you're
may not
gonna
want
put
to use
this
a
on this
cutesy
side.
font.
Okay.
At the next break, I'm
Right.
gonna actually get.
They
I'm gonna
may
have
want to
the
use
camera
something
guy
more like a Times New Roman or any
You'll
one of
you'll
these
show
up
them
here
like
would
where
be
you
fine.
maybe you'll wanna
But I
do
also
it,
want to
just
make
so
sure
to
that
make
you
sure
saw the
that he has
difference
enough
between the
like slots for
sizes
the
of
camera
fonts,
and all
because it
that.
does make a difference.
We'll get it all set up.
Over
Good morning,
lunch, I
Teresa.
gotta get my stuff. I forget to get all my stuff.
No
So
worries.
how
you have
many
plenty of time.
fonts should you use? And there's someone here shaking their head, go no. I don't want to, because you can see some people want to get crazy with the fonts and they want to have fun with it. And I understand that, but really limit it. There should really be no more than 3, okay? Less than 2, 1 or 2 is okay. You may have a different one for your title, and then maybe a kind of a secondary one for your bullet points. But really, that's about it, okay? And just be careful on the ones that you're choosing. If you get too many fonts in there, it's too hard to read. The other thing too is try not to use all capital letters when you're putting in your fonts. When you're text messaging, it's like shouting, okay? But when people read, they also go by the shape of the word. So if you have all capital letters, it looks like a big rectangular box. Someone peeking in the door. All right, so you want to use, upper and lower case, because again, people will go by the shape of the word. Color combinations. As we look at color combinations, again, some of the stock templates that we have don't always have the best color combinations. These are ones that you should avoid. Here on the left-hand side, green and red, any green and red combination. There's a percentage of the population that is colorblind, so they can't differentiate from those two colors. But it's also very hard on the eyes looking at those two color combinations. Green seems to be really a popular one for the ones to avoid. Green and blue, green and gray, green and black. Some blues, blue with purples, blue with gray, and then green with yellow. You'd really want to avoid those color combinations. All right, they're just, and if you're, when you're looking at this screen, you can see how difficult they can be. And I've tried to put some of the opposite too. When you have green, red, I have green background with red letters or red background with green letters. It just doesn't show up. Always think about the person who's in the back of the room. The simple ones to use, you can't go wrong with black on white or white on black. Okay. White on red could be used. If you're going to use a dark blue background, use a bright yellow font. Red on white. Again, if you're going to have a yellow background, have it a pale, pale yellow, use a dark blue font. You can use black, but use a dark blue. White, purple is a pretty decent combination. And then black with beige, and make sure your beige is really a light beige. And you notice on mine, I have a black background. My fonts I have here, the top one's a little bit of a shaded font, but not too bad. But on most of my slides, you'll see either white on black or black on white. Sometimes I vary it up if I have a pale background. We are not here to do the Ishihara test on our people who are in the audience, right? And this is how, this is what they see. And that's what can make it challenging. So we want to make sure that it's a pleasant experience for the people who are watching our presentations. Keep your background simple. Now, again, on this font, I kind of have a little variety of a shaded color, but you can still see them pretty clear against that black background. And actually, if you notice on the background that I have, it's darker at the top. It's a little bit lighter at the bottom. So I have a very shallow gradient, okay? At least that's how it shows up on my iPad. But then we have lights on the top of the room that are kind of putting a little bit of a glare on the top. So be careful about contrast gradients in your slide. And I know there's a lot of template ones that are out there. And I made this one up. If you have a gradient background, okay, just remember that if you have dark at the top, light at the bottom, and all of your font is one color and it's a light color, they're not going to show up very well. And you kind of see it. It's very difficult to read that bottom line. Okay. This is a dark on the top, black fading out to white on the bottom, or a gray. If you want to use a different color font for the top and the bottom, you could. I used white just for, to really show you how it cannot come across. If you wanted to use a totally different color for all of your fonts, that really is going to be bright and show up. But a lot of the time, this one's it can be very challenging. Here's another type of background that I've seen, is one where it's gradient, but it's a little different way of the gradient. And so it's hard to see the letters as they go from the light color to the, or the dark color to the gray color. So be cognizant of those things. Again, on my iPad or my laptop or computer, it probably doesn't look bad, but always think about the person who's in the back of the room. So then I want to talk about words, pictures, charts, and graphs, and how you should use them. A lot of this goes on some multimedia theory as we're putting together presentations, videos, things like that. Words. when you're looking at using bullet points on your slide, don't mess with my slides. Okay, they should be affirmative and active. Okay, they should, and you want to kind of engage your audience with the words in there, but you should have no more than 3 to 5 bullet points per slide. And it shouldn't be paragraphs. Okay, you want to keep it boom, so it draws the attention, but then you're going to be speaking about what topic you want to use. I'm one who's very visual, so I like to use a lot of images, and images, you know, they say a picture says 1,000 words. Okay, so when we are going to use pictures, you want to make sure you use high quality graphics. So on the left-hand side is a picture of my dog. Anyways, his name's Goofball. But it's a high quality picture. The projector does a little different than on my slide, but then you can see the lower resolution slide there on the left where it's kind of grainy, fuzzy. If you stretch it out and you don't constrain proportions, it's going to get pixelated, and the words, if there's words, they're going to be torqued and blurred and hard to read. So if you're going to do something, use high quality pictures. And I'm going to tell you, it was a challenge to find the low resolution pictures, because a lot of the ones now that if you want to download or find are usually a pretty decent quality, but be sure to avoid those. And I know as over the past 4 days, as I've watched many presentations, I mentally look at things and I go, okay, this is what I would do, because there's some things people do that I'm like, oh, that was kind of cool. And I always pull it into mind. There's some things like, oh, it could have been done better, but that's, you know, that just goes in my head and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure I don't do that in the future. So if you're going to do charts and graphs, okay, keep them simple. I showed a simple line chart, okay, and a bar graph. Presenting information in tables, especially if you have a lot of data. So I know some of the data we've seen over the past few days, and we look at evidence-based practice and all the research studies, and these are the results. And I have one that's, here's my table of my final analysis, my statistical analysis. And it's like, you look at it and you're like, yeah, okay, what does it mean? Okay, if you can put it in a graph, a picture, a chart to really get your point across, that's better for your audience to retain the information. They've also mentioned that if you're going to use colors in charts, because the Mac and the Apple does really some neat 3D graphs and all that, but sometimes that can be difficult for the reader. So if you keep them just plain 2-dimensional, you're fine. You don't have to be real fancy. Keep the colors simple, solid colors. Sometimes I like a little gradient on them, depending on what my background is and maybe what the material I'm presenting. But again, keep them simple. You don't have to go wow. And I've fallen into that trap before too. So some of the principles when we talk about multimedia and things like that is coherence with words. Some people use music. They'll use symbols in there. Did I hit? No, I didn't hit it. Hold on. It's not what I wanted. Let's go back. So we want to look and see how these are all connected with images and what we're saying on the screen. Signaling. If we have something in the slide that's important for someone to hear or to see, and maybe you're listing out some bullet points and there's a key word in there, bold it or italicize it, or bold italicize is even better. What you don't want to do is maybe, again, cautious use of the color. Sometimes we want to like red. We want to really highlight the red. But again, if we have people who are maybe colorblind or just doesn't go with the background, it may not work as well. So the ideal is bolding it, italicizing it, or even doing both with that. And this just highlights and brings attention to that essential material. It could be in a picture, in a graph, whatever. And you can signal with arrows. Use your arrows. I use some animations in mine, so it really points it out, or to bring it in. It doesn't necessarily have to be just a static image. Use some animations in there. I think I talked that in another presentation. I don't remember which one. If you need to, you can flash it. Let's see if I can do it. It's supposed to. It didn't. All right, I was gonna have my son flash. Or if you can have it flash with an animation in your, as you're playing with doing the animations, there's several. You can flash it, you can pulse it, you can wipe right, you can have it type in. But again, I have key ones that I like. I like wipe right. So if I'm bringing in words, it's going to wipe it from the left to the right. Dissolve is another one that I like to use. Appear, not so much unless I really need to. That's probably more when I'm doing advanced animations. But the two I like are dissolve and wipe right, especially if I'm bringing in words. There's my flash. You can flash it to highlight it. You can pulse it. And then if you need to, bring in your red dot. Now I have my iPad and my pencil. I'm running my presentation with, I don't use clickers, I use this, because now I have the opportunity to, on here, you can't see it on yours, but I have a red dot that I can go ahead and highlight on. Because sometimes when we have the clickers and it has a red dot, that red dot is really small. And I'm shining it up there. And from our, we're not moving our hand much, but it's flinging across the screen. So sometimes this gives me a little bit more control when I wanna use my red dot. I also like writing on mine. If you hadn't noticed that, I have many different colors that I can use. So if I need to, then I can. It doesn't permanently save it to that. Once I hit done and go to the next, it goes away. So here's some examples, and these are just some presentations that I've done. I had to do one on how to use an ophthalmoscope. I think some people may have watched that one. So I wanted to signal, so here's the head of the ophthalmoscope. Okay, so we have a head of our ophthalmoscope, but I also wanted to signal there's the 4 different lights that you can go through, or the shapes of lights. So when I talk about it, I talk about the circle, the one with the grid, the slit, and then the one with the green. So I signal that using my arrows. I do have some animations with it. I just use a screenshot for here. But now you can see that I'm using my red dot to really highlight that information. Okay. Or if I have text, because I do a lot with presenting case studies. So I want to present text. I'll use a highlight. I used a shape. This is actually a square shape. I've just stretched it out to make it a rectangle, and then I've decreased the opacity so you can still see the words behind it. So in this particular instance, we were talking about, I think it was heart failure. I always talk about heart failure, go figure. But then I can actually then highlight what are the key points for this patient in this particular history and physical, which I want to draw attention to, as this is what they're saying going on with heart failure. Spatial contiguity. This is, you want to make sure your words are close to your text. You don't want to have a bunch of text maybe on the left, and I really tried not to put bad examples up, because then I didn't want you to remember those. So think about if you have words on the left-hand side of the page and your picture's on the right, or words on one page, you go to the next page and then there's your picture. But to coordinate, to make sure that everybody can see what you're talking to. So I have class 1, this is my cardiac action potential, which I really hate, but I have to learn it. I have to know it. So I have my class 1 beta blockers, and it sees my arrow. So I'm pointing that That's in the phase 1. So I have it close in proximity on my picture. Class 4 calcium channel blockers. And you can see, you know, and then I have the signaling with the arrows. Class 1 sodium channel, more sodium channel blockers, or is that class 2? My old lady glasses aren't on. This is where they act. Class 3 potassium blockers work here. Class 4, this is where beta blockers work. Okay, so I have in my image on my screen, I have my words close to where I'm putting them on my drawing. All right, so then it's easier for that person to know. Because if I just had class 1, 2, 3, 4 on the left, and then there's action potential without the labels, how much would it really, would you connect that information? Temporal contiguity. This is also kind of goes along with the spatials, that you want to have them close together, but you want to have them timed. So I'm not talking 3 slides away in a picture that's going to show up, you know, in the future, or, you know, maybe the next slide over. You want to keep them close together. So I have an animation here. So this is, all right, these are my conceptual drawings of a cell and my sodium, potassium, calcium channels. Some things I can draw myself, some things I can't. But what I want to show you is that, so when I'm talking about the sodium channel, okay, so I'm talking about the sodium channel, you can see I use an animation. So my sodium molecule is moving into the cell, and it says the sodium enters the cell. So now when I talk about, I know my potassium didn't move. My potassium is supposed to move. But then also even my calcium enter the cell. I want to keep those timed so they're together. All right, so people can connect the dots. A lot of people learn visually, and when they see this, they time it, they can actually retain the information better. Because I know there's some presentations I've seen, and like, I remember key points out of them for certain reasons. Others, I'm like, and that's why some handouts, they tend to be just words, because I know I'm going to refer back to them. So these are some of the references that I use. Laws and rules, evidence-based human factor guidelines for PowerPoint presentations. It's a nice one, along with multimedia learning. So it has a lot of good information there. But I want to ask the people who are here, what kinds of things maybe when you're putting something together, is you're like, oh, I wish there was a better way, I couldn't think of it. Do you have any ideas or any questions about that?
How do you access the displays you show us? Where do you go for like the colors and the circles and all that? Where do you find that? What site?
As far as this, I make my own. I've done all these.
How do you do that?
How do I do that? Wasn't expecting that question. In Keynote, these are create shapes. So I insert a shape. Well, on my Mac, you can do it in PowerPoint. You add a shape. And then these are adding animations. As I do that. You want me to show you how to do some animations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the beginning of where you go.
Okay. I'm going to X out. Okay. Presentation's over. Now, the people who are on Zoom, they may not be able to see this, but let me start a new one. And you can't see it, but on mine, you see I have all the black and white ones pop up first. She may need to change the display on the tablet, on the laptop. Just do desktop one. Let me just turn that off. desktop display. There it is. At one of these points, I will. Should be that one. I'm back to the main display here for projector. All right, are you seeing my screen up there? Okay. All right, so this is how I do it. Don't mind my messy desktop. So let's start a new one. I hear myself echoing on yours. Let's do this. So when I want to, let's get a blank slide. Okay. I want to add a shape. I can add a shape like this.
What site are you at? What's-
I'm on Keynote. This is the Mac equivalent of PowerPoint.
So the Mac will, that's what we need to do, the Mac will PowerPoint, okay.
Yes. Sorry about
So
that.
you go to Mac, Quill, QUILL, PowerPoint.
Well, I mean, it's just when you, whichever computer I have PowerPoint on this. I also have Keynote. I just tend to use the software Keynote. I'm moving away from the camera.
Much more user-friendly.
You know,
If I'm gonna ask a question, and it's probably gonna help you guys. So I became an Apple guy a decade ago, and I loved Keynote. The problem is that so many of the facilities or places you go to don't have, like, I was so excited to come here and present, and there be Macs.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of a rarity. And so the challenge is that whatever software you have to match. You have to match to the site where you're presenting. So a lot of hospitals, for instance, where I've taught, they don't have Macs, and they don't even have, they still are using technology from 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So you can't, I've ended up being stuck with PowerPoint because
That's all the other people have. But
Because
now with
that's all.
laptops, I bring my own laptop. I have my own cables. I'm all,
so you had to figure out.
yes.
So I've used both softwares, and I much prefer Keynote. The problem is that many places
Don't have
don't
it.
support it.
Yeah.
So,
But now with the mobility of devices, it's so much easier. I'll just bring mine, I bring my connector, and I'm good that way. And you know your own equipment, and you know how your presentation shows up on your own equipment, right? When I bring in a USB stick and then I go to somebody else's, quirky things happen in that, little magnetic device when it goes from one to another. So, and if I have a Mac, I'm doing Mac with PowerPoint and I take it over to a PC type, it doesn't, there's quirky things that happen.
I've taught at a big
Yeah.
university that is still using XP Windows.
Oh, wow.
And so nothing
That
is,
is
you have to just go back to 2006.
Yeah. And even ours at the university, if you bring a USB, it can be read-only. You have to have it encrypted and all that stuff. So what I do is, this is in Keynote. It's equivalent, it's just a software. It's just a different software. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a different,
I've never used Keynote, so I can learn it.
whichever. If you have a Mac, you can learn it. So like when I do this and I want to, all right, let's make it a blue ball. And you want to know, let's see, sorry, Rachel's all in there. So you want to know how I make animations and move things, and I can add an effect. There's a list on the side. I can make it appear. I can have it bouncy. I can have it wipe. Obviously, those are my top ones that I've just used. There's a whole slew of them that I can choose. This one's a ball. So I'm gonna make it bouncy. And I can make it bounce. And again, you also, when you're doing anime, I talk about this kind of a little others, use them appropriately. Don't just, hey, I want to use fun stuff. It can be distracting. So you want them to focus on the presentation and how it all fits together, right? If I'm talking about shape, I can search thermometer, something healthcare related, right? Format. Let's make it red. Okay. But I want to add a little animation because I want to talk about the effect of, you know, rising blood pressure or rising temperatures. I know I said blood pressure. I'm cardiology, I'm all about blood pressure. I can wipe it. That's kind of weird though. But I can wipe it from the left, the right, the top, the bottom, angled. Okay. Okay, and then I can adjust how long I want it to go over. Say I want it to go over 3 seconds. I can change that. Oops. And make it slower.
So it's the software package.
And PowerPoint does most of the stuff that Keynote will do. It just doesn't do it. It's much easier to, if you never use Keynote, you could jump into Keynote and you can start building stuff. And it's much simpler because Apple's better at it.
Okay. And we're going to tell you, we have no, I don't get kickbacks from
Yeah,
Apple.
I wish I did.
Yeah, me too. You know,
So if you can switch to Mac, it's a better platform for doing this kind of work, but you're gonna invest, you know, for a basic Mac computer, you're looking at $800 to $1,200 for a Mac computer.
yeah, PCs are not, they're much, I won't say less expensive, I was gonna say cheap, because they're not cheap, but they're less expensive. But then you have to get all those packages on top of that, because PowerPoint costs what, $300?
Well, the Microsoft Office.
Yeah, the suite, yeah. This all comes with it free. It comes with it built in and things like that. Let's see, let me get rid of those. I want to do a chart. I have all of these options to do with charts. These are 2D, these are 3D. These are interactive ones, which I don't use too much yet. I don't have anything cool for interactive. But I put in my charts. These came out gradient, you know, but I can also change the colors. It just, this one doesn't show, I don't think these show up particularly well on a white background. I would change my background, but more than anything, I just change my colors. And you can see the difference between the colors. Yeah. And then it has all of these that you can pick from. You can pick from, you know, kind of images that have a little bit of a text. I like a little bit of texture in mine though. So when I read, they said, no, I'm like, no, I still like it. May not show it up on the big screen. And again, it all depends. Now, if I was doing a presentation on woodworking, because my husband now has a nice new lathe, okay, and we're talking about woodworking, I might do something with a wood grain graph. I think that would be appropriate. Okay. I would hate to use something that was like blood red in case, you know, something happened. But, you know, so those are some things that you can do with just the charts. Change that back.
Sharon, is it possible to move yet? I don't know, or is it possible to move between PowerPoint and Keynote, or are they still completely proprietary? I don't know, can you build in one?
Okay, so the question is, can you go back and forth between Keynote and PowerPoint? Well, if you have a Mac computer, you can open PowerPoint presentations in Keynote. Okay, but you cannot do it the opposite way. If you have a PC, it won't even recognize a Keynote format. Yeah, now I can also export this to a PowerPoint. There's always a little bit of formatting issues and some things that don't transfer. So that's why for me, I like keeping my laptop with me. I know what it's going to look like. I know it's not going to mess up between mine and somebody else's computer. because somebody will have maybe some different settings or something like that. So,
So if somebody has, like, I'm working from Mac, I'm using Keynote, and they have a antiquated PC Windows setup, is it always possible for you to use your computer now with projectors and just bypass their system, or do you still have to run it through their, that's right.
so the question is, if I have my Mac, somebody has an antiquated piece, non-Mac version. Okay, and can I,
Can you, with cords, just plug in? Have you ever been in a situation where you can't run your Mac through there?
I don't run it through their equipment. I'm not even hooked up to their equipment. The only thing I'm hooked up to is the projector. I'm not even using their their computers at all. I'm just on the projector. And I'm going to tell you, I'm very self-contained. I even have my own little projector at home in case I need it. I have my own mic system, you know, because there's been times where I've needed it, and you want to look good as a presenter. And you always show up early, you test the equipment, you make sure it runs. And if it doesn't, you try and troubleshoot it, but there's times when it hasn't worked. So I have mine always as a backup. I tested mine out last night. I don't need it today, but I tested it out last night just to make sure in case I did. Because we know throughout the past few days, there's been a few technical issues. So I'm like, yeah.
Recently, a few years ago, I was shown places and they're still using like RCA, and it's hooked up through their PC Windows.
Like, what's an RCA cord?
Or like an old red,
RGB.
or RGB rather.
Oh, good. I was like,
RCA.
yeah, this is an HDMI. I have a VGA cord just in case. I mean, I know what you meant. Yeah, I keep all my connectors with me to make sure I can hook up, because I can't just directly hook into this computer. And some computers don't. The Air, I think, has less ports, even so. Yeah, this is my best buddy. Yeah. So.
And it's a Mac.
Yeah, I'm a Mac. Yeah. And I'm decked out. I have my Mac, I have my iPad, I have my iPhone. I have a desktop.
You're ready, you're set.
Well, and it's really nice because then if, say, he wanted to share something with me, he could airdrop it to me. I don't need a USB.
Like we can send, she could send me her entire presentation, just
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah. Now I have all of my device synced. So like if I'm shoot somewhere and I just have my phone with me, I thought of something, I'm like, I can add it to the presentation and it goes across all my devices.
Amazing, that is incredible
So yeah, there's a lot of,
technology.
yeah, there's a lot of technology, and it gets, you have to get used to it. And even presenting over the past 2 years with COVID, you know, presenting now with Zoom. And she did move the camera, thank you. You know, be cognitively aware that there's people out there who are watching me. Amber's been hopefully watching my phone to see if anything's popped up, but she says no, which is fine. It's a skill. It takes practice, and some people, it's more challenging than others. But you know, you always have to, okay. And now I'm thinking, now it's going to be weird when if I'm not doing a Zoom and I'm like, there's no people in the cyberspace, whatever. So it's always interesting, you know. And I think the past years have forced us to use technology better in presentations. So yes, and you would agree also. It's just now these are the kind of the cool things, because people are still stuck with, here's my PowerPoint, here's my words on a slide, and I'm gonna stand up there and read from the slides. And I even have to make sure my students aren't doing that. And so I'm trying to get them, okay, now you have to record the video. How are you gonna do it? And I make them do a test, you know, at the very beginning. Okay, you have to do a video, and you have to, or a presentation like this, and you have to include so many animations. You have to insert so many shapes, so many images, a movie or a hyperlink or something like that, just to get him in that mode.
It's great.
So, And the next one that I'm talking on is background lighting, podcasts and videos and how to create them. And I think then the following one is presentation technologies and different things that you can do in present. That explains more on how to create kind of some of these animations. Again, it's very high level because I only had an hour. If we had a workshop and I'd say, everybody bring your laptops. I didn't think about it when they asked me to. Maybe next year. Bring your laptops. Let's go through this and let's work on a presentation. Let's get you to do that. So then it'd be a little bit more interactive. Right.
Is this part of, in the nursing school curriculum, is this just part of a class that you teach, or is this?
I incorporate this into the courses. So like, I'm trying to remember it.
Like when the students have to do a project, then you use that as that vehicle to teach.
Yes. And I also have my students doing a lot of presentations because they have to present, and we do asynchronous online discussions. So they have to be able to post a video there so their classmates can watch it and then have interaction that way. And so I'm getting to learn these techniques. So when they finally graduate, because obviously as nurse practitioners, we are going to be presenting, they look good. So yeah, and it takes practice, but like the first one, okay, we're doing something, they've had to do, their health assessment videos. I said, just take your phone, just record it, start simple, go through the steps. Okay, now you have to do video, or you had to do this on, need you do it in, oh, that's another topic, another software that they use to be able, it's called Explain Everything. I'm talking about that later on. But even when I have them do this a simple presentation, and it's related to the class topic, but I also say you have to include this, 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 and this. And I have a grading rubric that has unacceptable, as if they sit up here in a monotone voice and read from the slides, mechanical, something that's acceptable, like, okay, but then I have, this is exceptional, is when you can incorporate all of these things. So, and it takes practice. I've been guilty of all of those things that to avoid in my days. I'm like, I could throw a presentation together tonight, working on your master's, your DNP. I could throw it together the night before, and then it's just words on a slide. And now I'm like, oh my gosh. How embarrassing, so when you're up and you're presenting, you also want to be a little entertaining.
Right.
So, yes.
Yeah.
Again, think over the past few days on which speakers you really enjoyed and which ones you're like, okay, it's 2 PM. I need, but if you have somebody who's very engaging, their slides are engaging, provides good information. They all present good information, but engaging information that you're going to retain, because that's one of the whole points of doing presentations, is to share information so you learn something and retain it, right?
That's the goal.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
That's right.
So yeah, so that's kind of at least starting. These are some animation. I go over some a little bit later on. How to create animated GIFs. I say GIF. GIF reminds me of peanut butter. Yeah, how to do some animations, how to export to a video, how when you're creating a video or creating a presentation, how do you collect all the things that you have to collect to put in there. I go that into, I think it might even be my next one, which starts in like 3 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Any other questions on this? A lot of it's, think to the person at the back of the room.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I apologize because you probably covered this, but I had other duties that kept me out of here for a little bit. Do you prefer PowerPoint or Keynote?
I
And
use a
what-
Mac, I use Keynote.
But you have to have a
Okay.
map.
Yeah, I use
well,
Keynote, but
but-
I don't use PowerPoint.
At all?
The only
Why-
thing I like about PowerPoint is the smart art. But then even when I can capture that image, pull it into Keynote, I can't break it apart and then manipulate it. I'm practicing on how to do that better in my Keynote.
So why do you like Keynote better? What? Just, I mean, because you can use either on a Mac, obviously.
Correct. It's ease of use and it's more intuitive. It's,
You're searching for stuff on PowerPoint, it's all there, but it's not clear where it is. Keynote is just, it's so simple.
yeah. Yeah, so, and I think you heard Kate, but yeah, everything's simple. So if I want to create a table, it's right here, a chart. Yeah, PowerPoint has some of that and they're getting better because they're, following us. Shapes, I can, search through shapes. Media, I can add, there's just some things in Keynote that I can do that I can't do in PowerPoint. And,
Like in PowerPoint to create, if I may, I'm sorry.
go ahead and,
In PowerPoint in PowerPoint to do this, you have to change your entire header and then go search in the new header for the tools you want. For Keynote, they're right there. I guess that's really the biggest difference.
yeah. I can if I wanted to, you can do this too. I can have my web video. I can do live video in here. These are all things that you can do. Scott Schaefer has entered the waiting room. Okay, I'm just trying to move it. Okay, there we go. I can add comments. I can collaborate with this. Again, formatting, I can do my animations and they're just easier to manipulate.
So it's ease of use, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And it's familiarity. I'm sure there's some things in PowerPoint that they probably advanced, but I use my Macs and I just, somewhat of a purist.
It's 11 o'clock.
I have one more question. And you probably answered this again, sorry. So you don't have any problems using Keynote and pulling it up? If you weren't using your own equipment, you can still do the Keynote, use Keynote if you go somewhere else to do a presentation,
Only if they have a Mac, because Keynote is Mac specific.
right?
Yeah, that's the only thing, but I always bring my own stuff.
Yep.
We kind of went over that. I'm like, I'm always self-contained.
Yeah, when we first started doing these conferences years ago, we basically did our own AV, which sounds like a nightmare to me now. But PCs were the big thing, but people would bring their own Macs sometimes. So I learned very quickly I needed the extra adapters and that kind of thing to plug them in, but
Yeah,
Okay.
and mine's always with me.
Yeah.
I always carry it with all those things. I carry it with me and like I said, due to technical issues that we've had in the past, whether it's been here or other places, man, I even have my own microphone with speaker. It's maybe not overhead, but I have my own projector. It's just a little small one. I've got it probably 20 years ago, but it still works. So if I ever, needed to, I've got backups. I tested all out last night just to make sure, just in case, but it's, you live and learn. There's always the one time. So, and I'm not saying you have an HP, so you have a PC type, which is, I'm not going to say that's wrong or anything like that. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but you really get to the top of the learning curve quickly. No, that's not the one I wanted.
So Sharon, when you're ready to move on to the second one, stop the recording.
Okay, so we can stop recording now. We'll get ready for the next one, which we're 1 minute over.
It's the same conference to one on the two.
Did they change?
That's the other breakout session.
End of life is over?
End of life, telehealth, pens, pumps, and sensors.